Happy Sunday. Happy Sunday. It is NFL Sunday. We can finally say that. It feels like it's been a long time since we said that. But I got a special guest here. I got my guy Omar, who's a contributor and sports writer for Off the Ball Network and runs the Deep Covered Sports. And you can check out those his articles on there as well. It's a sports commentary that goes beyond the highlights and box scores. But how's it going, Omar?
I'm great, Aaron. Thanks for reading my tagline there. That was very nice of you. Happy to be on again. I'm just glad that you just let a Giants fan on your podcast again. So just
Oh,
happy to be back.
yeah, absolutely. Hey, you could be a fan of any team on here, and we're gonna show you the utmost respect. We may talk a little
Of course.
smack talk, but it's all friendly over here.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir. But I always ask the guests, so what is like a few questions and stuff, so the audience can know who you are and everything, and then we kind of go into the nitty gritty of it. But my first question is tacos and touchdown. What has been the best taco place you ever been to?
Ooh, man. So when I was living in Detroit, there was there's a like kind of like in the southwest portion of the city. There's a El Rey type place, and it's predominantly Hispanic area. And whenever I wanted to get tacos, I would go down there. I'm trying to remember the name. I can't think of it offhand, but it had the best carne tacos I've ever had, and they're just like seasoned perfectly. The tortilla was excellent. I used to always go again if anybody's from the Michigan area to a place called Imperial. I kind of feel like those are kind of gentrified tacos, but they are also very tasty. Their El Pastor was excellent. So
Okay,
yeah, so those are kind of be my two call outs there.
okay, hey, that's some good choices. Do you do
Mhm.
flour or corn tortilla?
I'm a corn tortilla guy, typically. Yeah. So, but I always say I'm kind of not really picky. I just moved to the Washington State, Seattle area, and there's a taco truck right by the house here. It's called Tacos El Rey as well. And I had some chicken and carne tacos from them, and they were amazing and on corn tortilla. So, but yeah, I usually go corn, but I'll have flour as well from time
Okay.
to time.
So you're in the Washington State area, so you're not
Mhm.
dealing with no 100-degree weather. You're dealing like 70s and
No,
80s.
man, we're good. We're good over here. It's about like 80 degrees over here. So none of that scorching heat that I know you guys are dealing with in Texas. So
Yeah, I'm just hoping we get into 80 degrees. I'd be fine with that, but that 100 degrees and at 2 o'clock in the day is. Uh,
hmm.
it's been a long time since I've seen double digits. Say that.
Yeah, that's bad.
Absolutely. But my next question is, where'd you get the passion to become a sports writer?
Ooh, I'll try to keep this short. So I got into writing right before COVID hit, and at the time I was doing a lot of. So even before that, actually. So when I was like in my early 20s, I did dabbled in like poetry and stuff, and did open mics and things like that. As like a fan of rap music, the poetic aspect of lyricism always kind of interested me, and but fast forward to 2020, I was like, man, I have a lot of thoughts about technology and I want to write about it. So that's what I started doing. And then when the pandemic hit, I just had, everybody was at home, everybody's on lockdown. I had all this time to work on writing. So I really kind of honed my capability there. And after a while, I work in the technology field and became a little bit of a conflict of interest to only write about tech. So I was like, man, I'm really into sports. Maybe I could try that out. And it started off only writing about basketball and the New York Knicks, my preferred basketball team. But it kind of evolved into talking about all sports. And it's now become the exclusive thing that I do. So I write two articles a week, as you know,
Yeah.
for Off the Ball and my publication Deep Cover. And yeah, I mean, it's fun to, talking about sports, writing about them in a non-conventional way has always kind of just interests me so much because I feel like, as I'm sure you can attest, like everything, a lot of people now do like clickbait and
Yeah.
all this type of stuff just to get engagement, whether just say an outlandish take on social media just to get replies and stuff like that. And I always feel like there's a deeper conversation to be had, and not everybody wants to see a first take style commentary, right? You want something a little more nuanced, and that's kind of what I try to provide.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. You always see a lot of people that are saying crazy, outlandish things, but is that like that's honestly how you feel? Or are you just doing that so you can get a whole bunch of people trying to yell at you. How do you dare you say
Mhm.
all this and all that instead of like
I mean,
like
you as a Cowboy fan, Aaron, you kind of you're on the receiving end of that a lot. It's a team that's in the headlines a lot, obviously,
yeah,
for because there's a lot. You're a national team, right? I always feel
yeah,
like the Cowboys, the Raiders, the Steelers,
yeah,
49ers to an extent are kind of national fan bases,
mm,
just because of the tenure and the history of championships from back in the day and success after. And so you always get like some crazy outlandish takes, and it's going to get people riled up because those fan bases are so huge. So
yeah,
I try to avoid that, and we all fall victim to it from time to time, I feel like, with an outlandish take here or there. But I always feel like, having more nuance and, think of a different type of conversation is the better way to go.
absolutely. So my next question is
Mhm.
for my introduction is
Mhm.
what was the Giants player that made you become a Giants fan?
Okay, so this is a funny story. So when I was growing up, I grew up in New York City. And so when I was
Okay.
growing up, my dad didn't really like sports. Like he had a little flirtation with basketball in the late 80s with the Detroit Pistons. He loved the bad boy Pistons. But realistically, growing up in the '90s, I didn't really have a push towards a team or anything like that. So I had to kind of pick my own teams, right? So in basketball, I fell in love with Patrick Ewing, so became a Knick fan pretty quick. In football, I didn't get into it until later, and I was this close to being a Jets fan. They had Curtis Martin, who I loved at the time. Testaverde was the quarterback of the Jets. Wayne Corbett at receiver. They had a lot of interesting personalities, but it was honestly, I've always been fascinated with the receiver and the cornerback position more than most positions in the game. And they had Ike Hilliard at the time, and I just watched him one game on Sunday, and he just went crazy. And then, like, I think the following year, they had drafted Ron Dane out of Wisconsin, and they're going to do this whole thunder and lightning backfield with Tiki Barber, who was the starting back at the time. And I was like, man, this seems like a fun team and everything. And I just kind of latched on. And, I've been fortunate enough to witness 3 Super Bowl appearances, 2 Super Bowl wins in my lifetime, as a fan. And I appreciate that because as a Knick fan, I have not endured that success, So, it's I definitely consider myself fortunate to have gone with the Giants as opposed to the Jets, even though the Jets look like they might have a promising year this year.
Yeah, I just had a Jets fan on, but it seemed like you made the right choice between the New York teams if you're talking about in the last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So now we're getting into like the NFC ranking. So we used
Hmm.
to be called the NFC least, but last year we were
Yeah.
showing that we're back to those early 2000s and
Mhm.
90s where you have some really good teams. It's kind of like we're almost in a three because we were looking at almost all four were almost all in the playoffs, but it was
Yeah.
just the Eagles, Cowboys, and the Giants that made it. So where do you have the NFC rankings on your?
Now for the division, you're saying for the
Yeah, this
NFC
is the
East?
division. Yeah,
Okay.
this is the division.
I think it's Philly's division. I mean, I think we could probably agree with that, right? They're probably the best team in the conference,
Yeah,
right there with San Francisco. Yeah, with most people, I think Dallas and New York are kind of neck and neck, right? I feel like they're going to be fighting for that 2 and 3 spot.
yeah,
Washington, even though they did win today against
yeah.
Arizona, so take
Mhm.
it for whatever that's worth, right? Arizona, I feel like, is actively tanking at this moment, but I think Washington, Sam Howell, I don't think he's the answer. I think they're going to draft somebody next year. I imagine them falling and staying in that 4th spot. It's really so the real interesting bit is Dallas and New York. So, and obviously the Giants finally have a winning season after multiple losing seasons under the previous regime. And Dayball is looking like one hell of a coach. They signed a lot of players in the offseason. Acquired Darren Waller, the Jalen Hyatt rookie acquisition at receiver. Seems to be promising. But you wonder how sustainable it is. And if Daniel Jones is at the next level. Then on the Cowboys side, obviously they lose Zeke, so now it's kind of Pollard's show, and they got Deuce Vaughn in there, who I think is a promising backup running back. But they acquired Trey Lance, and you kind of hear rumblings about them trying to maybe get off of Dak Prescott's money, and I think that's going to be the tug and pull. I could see either of those teams winning 9 games or so, but I could also see one of them only winning 7. Right, so. So for me, as a Giants fan, obviously I'm going to be optimistic and say Giants 2, Cowboys 3, but I could honestly go either way, I think.
Mine's a little different. I
Mhm.
just don't see the Eagles back as the NFC East
Mm.
champion. It's actually been since 2001 to 2004 when they did it, and they were the last team
Mhm.
to do it. And
That's a good point about the history of the conference, right? There's always a new champion. It seems like every single year.
yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, I question about the Eagles. They got a new offense coordinator and a defense
Mhm.
coordinator, and that's my biggest thing. And they did have to replace a couple of guys with younger guys that are like, because I know they got Hargrave because they got rid of, I forgot who. No, they lost Hargrave to the 49ers, and then they
Mhm.
replaced him with a Jalen Carter. Yeah, he was a really good prospect out of Georgia, but now trying to get him back into the league, and now you got a new defensive coordinator, offense coordinator. I think they're still going to be a playoff team. Absolutely.
Mhm.
I have them at number 2. You can call me a homer on this, but I do got the Cowboys
Dallas at
there.
1.
Yeah, Dallas at 1, and then the Giants are at number 3. I kind of feel
Mhm.
like those 3 teams are going to be in the playoffs. Like you were saying, I don't know if Sam Howell is that quarterback.
No.
I don't think they're going to be fighting for that number 1 spot. I think the Cardinals are just going to. You may see a 2008 Detroit Lions with them. I think they're ready to get rid of Kyler Murray and move on with a Caleb Williams type. I think that's their championship. Is can we get that first overall pick? And I got the Commanders at least winning 7 games, and
Mhm.
I see the Giants getting between 9 to 10 wins, the Eagles about 11, and I see the Cowboys with 12. I'm
Mhm.
I feel like it's almost like neck to neck when it comes to in our conference. It's not going to be like, oh, one team is doing. There's only going to be one team coming out of the division, and I think those 3 teams will be in there. I don't know that I didn't really get deep into those divisions, like how the playoffs will be in the NFC, but
Mhm.
I think it's gonna be there's gonna be 3 NFC teams in this.
The thing you look at too, Aaron, with the NFC as a conference as a whole, like the NFC North is really interesting, right? Like you don't know what a Jordan Love's going to be like in Green Bay. Who you lose Rodgers, the Bears I think still aren't there. The Vikings I think are going to regress, and Detroit looked great in Week 1. Good call by you, by the way, picking that the right way. I know a lot of people had KC in that game, but it seems like they're probably in a pretty good spot to win the North. But I don't really see any of the other 3 teams as a viable threat. Right in the NFC West, you got the Seahawks who made it last year. The Rams are maybe rebounding, and you got 49ers as well. And then the NFC South is another weak division. It's so to get multiple teams from the East feels, I think, likely, right? I could, if not 3, at least definitely 2, right? And because the teams are good, and I think we have in the NFC the strongest division. You could argue that it's one of the stronger divisions in football right now. The AFC North would like a word, of course, right? They're a very good division, but yeah, I do think that it's not beyond the possibility that 3 make it in to the playoffs this year.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility. But our next thing is key matchups. So in the key matchups, I'm look. What are like some matchups you're looking for in this game that you're gonna have your eye on? Because I know you're saying you're deep into the receivers and the corners. Is there like a matchup you're looking at that, or another?
So I'm gonna go away from that. I
Okay.
think the Cowboys' running game with Dexter Lawrence there in the middle for the Giants is going to be interesting. Obviously, Pollard likes to get outside a bit. You utilize him in the passing game quite a bit. So I'm curious how Wink Martindale is going to scheme that. Isaiah Simmons, obviously a guy they just acquired from Arizona. How are they going to incorporate him? And also on the secondary side, I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm afraid or anything, but the Giants are going to be running really young in the secondary this year. 2 rookie corners that are probably going to get a lot of snaps, and you got a great receiving core over there in Dallas, obviously headlined by Lamb, and he could, yeah, I mean, if he gets the one-on-one matchups there, which tends to happen in Martindale's system because he likes to do these exotic blitz packages. That could be something to kind of keep in mind. So it's really Dexter Lawrence and kind of that inside running game. And I think the deep ball is going to be an interesting thing to see with these rookie corners trying to match up with CD Lamb.
Absolutely. So one of sticking on receivers, but
Mhm.
I'm actually looking at this matchup. It's kind of I feel like it's an underrated matchup, and it's Paris Campbell versus Deron Bland. Uh,
Hmm.
when I seen Paris Campbell, because I wanted him to be on the Cowboys, he has that yak ability, kind of that he has
Yeah.
those Debo Samuel type of qualities to his game, and he actually had his lone season where he was fully healthy. He had
Mhm.
over 600 yards, and one thing he does when he gets that ball in his hand, he doesn't get those extra yards. He's built like a running back, and now he's going against more of a he's a young physical corner in Deron Bland who plays in the nickel. And when it came to him, he allowed the fewest yards allowed with 8.7 after catch.
Mhm.
And I think that would be one where Deron Bland has to play physical but smart, because you can't just play physical, because a guy like that, you're playing against a physical receiver who can do some damage to you. So you got to play there, because he had those similar things with Diggs when he first came his second year, where he's going to try
Mhm.
to go for the ball at times. But I think sometimes you got to go for that pass breakup at times. I know it's not the big. I know they want to make that big play, but if you got to break up a pass, that's a big plus in that. And I think you just honestly just got. I know they play some zone when it comes to our defense, because you're playing against some shifty receivers,
Mhm.
but you got to figure out, okay, this is a perfect opportunity to go for the interception. But this maybe the next time we just go secure the tackle type of play, because y'all do. They're not well known receivers, but you got shifty young receivers, and y'all for some reason y'all have like excellent depth when it comes to the inside receivers, because you got Campbell, you got Shepard, and then you got Hyatt that could play
Mhm.
inside as well. So it's kind of like a nice shift when it comes to the inside receivers you got to look out for.
Yeah, I mean, the in previous off seasons, every Giants fan is like, "Oh, we gotta get Daniel Jones weapons, gotta get more weapons, more weapons." So you need something besides Saquon Barkley, and they answered it right. They trade for Darren Waller, a reliable pass catcher as long as he could stay healthy at the tight end position. Hyatt is, he showed that deep play ability in the preseason a little bit. And Shepard's always been a technician as a route runner his whole career, really. And obviously, injuries have held him back. Still got Darius Slayton there, Paris Campbell, who had a nice year in Indianapolis last year as well. And so now you have the weapons, right? And now you just gotta execute, right? And I think the point about the Cowboys DBs kind of going for the pick as opposed to the breakup's a really good one. Diggs, especially, he's gotten burned on it a few times, right? He's made plays to counter that, but in addition, when you go for the pick, you gamble, right? And sometimes when you gamble, you lose, and he has lost a couple here and there, and I'm curious to see if the Giants want to try to kind of bait him into that a little bit, right? And if they kind of want to, make it a situation where, like, all right, let's have him cheat a little bit, and then they do a little out and up, a little sluggo here and there, just to kind of take advantage of that aggression. But I am curious to see how that plays out. But yeah, ultimately, that's kind of these games between the Giants and Cowboys, even though, I mean, it's kind of a well-known thing now that, during the Dak Prescott era, the Giants haven't beaten the Cowboys, 10 straight losses. It's usually a tight game. They're not usually blowouts, right? But that's what I'm hoping for. A tight, close game, entertaining game, and I think it's going to hinge on a couple of those kind of big type plays, whether it's a kind of like a missed tackle in the run game or for Dallas, or a busted coverage in the passing game for the Giants.
Because when you look at now in the NFC East, our teams are almost basically loaded when it comes to the three teams. Like there's like a couple of here misses on the team, but when it comes to it, I think you won't see any blowouts when it comes to NFC East matchups. You're going to see maybe, okay, this team beat us without a field goal or by a touchdown in the fourth
Mhm.
quarter. There's going to be a lot of, and the defenses on both ends are pretty loaded. A lot of youth on there, and a lot of speed and a lot of physicality. I think that's what you're going to see in this game. But kind of going in there, what are the keys to victory do you think y'all got to do to beat the Cowboys?
Don't turn the ball over. That's a big one, right? And luckily DJ's gotten better about the fumbling thing, right? He kind of
Yeah.
remedied that last year. But beyond that, I think realistically, you need these long, sustained drives. You need to be able to just get the ball in the end zone, not settle for field goals, right? You need to get Saquon involved early and often. And on the defensive side, the Cowboys are playmakers, right? And you also need to make big plays on defense, whether that's a couple sacks here and there, maybe a turnover. And I think that's the big thing. I think you want to get Darren Waller involved early and often on offense. Get him and DJ kind of comfortable, and I think that could be the key to success there. X factor for me really is Isaiah Simmons though on defense for the Giants. I'm really curious to see as the season goes how Wink is going to kind of throw him in because he's such a versatile defender. I'm actually like his acquisition inspired me to write this article that I'm working on this week about kind of positionless defense and where you have these guys now who could play safety. They could play they could rush off the edge. They could play linebacker. They could do man-man coverage. And that's the type of skill set that Isaiah Simmons had. He's a guy, when he was coming out, I loved him in the draft. And, obviously I'm glad we took Andrew Thomas. He's been a stud. But, to be able to acquire him for a second-round pick is something I'm excited about. And most Giants fans are as well. But I think he's kind of like the X factor, in a good way or a bad way. Like he might be put in a bad spot and then get abused by one of these skill position players that the Cowboys have.
So my keys to victory, I like how you brought up a good point. You see a lot of those positionless players because we got one in Micah Parsons. But I want to go into offense first. Is you got to attack the edges when it comes to Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari. They're really good in the pass rush, but when it comes to the run, they're still developing as a edge rushers. So utilizing a Tony Pollard and a Deuce Vaughn in space, that'll definitely help in the run game because it's going to be a little tough trying to run up the gut due to the fact you got a Dexter Lawrence and then Leonard Williams type of guys because they didn't show there's some stout defensive tackles. A bit on the underrated side, like not many people talk about them, but they. Coming from being an NFC rival, you could tell like these guys ain't nothing to play around with. So, but you do got to test them every now and then because you can't kind of keep it stagnant because you do have a veteran defensive coordinator in Wink Martindale. He's gonna figure some type of schemes out. And then when it comes to in the passing game, of course, you're playing against a young corners in was it Trey Hawkins and Devontae Banks and another corner. You got three veteran receivers who you got to see can we take advantage of these guys when it comes to with a CD Lamb who got yak ability, who can break tackles, and then you got a Brandon Cooks who's very good in route running and can be a deep threat. And when it comes to Gallup, he can find those tight windows and make those catches. But can we get him to like when he was in 2021, or is he kind of gonna be like 2022? I know he's had a year and a half from the ACL injury, but I think we're going to see a Gallup. And I think one guy when it comes to the X factor, I think is going to be Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson, who's actually shown signs of maybe being that tight end one after Dalton Schultz, who we lost in free agency. I think he's going to make those extra steps to be tight end one when it comes to yak ability, being able to block. He's kind of like has a little bit of everything. But there's not like that thing where, this is what he utilizing. Like when it comes to Darren Waller, he's a really great receiver because he used to be a receiver for the Ravens. Then he converted to being a tight end, and he utilized both those skills. And now one of those top 5 tight ends. It kind of switches almost every year. You already know who number one is, Travis Kelce,
right, of course.
Then Kittle when he's healthy type of guy. But on defense, one thing that we finally utilized is we did get a veteran corner in a Stephon Gilmore that a Trayvon Diggs could learn from, and then a Deron Bland. And then in the first round, we surprisingly, since 1992, we actually drafted a defensive tackle in Mozzie Smith, who I think was going to be a good run stop with him and Hankins in a rotation. It's like when you look in the NFC East, you're looking at a team that these teams love to run the ball. And having those guys so where our linebackers can run free and a Micah Parsons, where he's basically a chess piece. You're gonna move him here or there. It just we gotta neutralize y'all's run game. The biggest thing about the run game, y'all do pre-snap motions. You can't fall for the okie doke at times because next thing you may be running, you may believe they're gonna run this way, but they may go the other way. It's like you gotta trust your eyes and just trust what you've been looking at in film. Like you got to be confident in that. And I think you just got to neutralize the run game and neutralize Daniel Jones making plays on the move because you got to neutralize him from being into a pocket passer where he's uncomfortable. If not, he's gonna have a great game, and that's my
Yeah, and that's something. I mean, both teams probably want to do that, right? You want to
yeah.
contain Dak in that aspect as well if you're the Giants, and obviously, like you said, you want to do that for the Cowboys defensively, if going up against Daniel Jones. And I think the way they utilize both of their running backs is going to be interesting as well. For to that point, because you do have these mobile quarterbacks that honestly, the funny thing is like you have these two guys who can run and have shown the propensity to run, but they don't really kind of get mentioned all that much. Everybody all obviously focuses on your Lamar Jacksons and Justin Fields and stuff like that. But these guys can make plays with their legs, and that's going to be interesting, especially when you talk about Micah Parsons. How are they going to kind of use him to maybe contain that element of the Giants' offense as well? Or do they kind of because Parsons is such a gifted player, and honestly, I hate that he's on the Cowboys, because we got to play him twice a year, right? But he's so good and like one of the best defensive players in the league, and he can cause havoc as he has multiple times for us already. When we faced him. So how they choose to use him defensively, I think is going to be an interesting kind of game within the game type thing for the Cowboys. And honestly, I'm excited, man, to open up with a division matchup is always fun, just especially our division, right? It's so many long rivalries, these kind of legacy franchises that have been around for the entirety of the NFL, basically. And, it's always a good time. And, whether it's against Dallas, Philly, or Washington, the games are always entertaining to me, and they just mean more, and, more so than a typical matchup. Like, as much as I, you know, kind of hate the fact that we've lost so many times in a row to Dallas. I always look forward to the Dallas game. So
Yeah, I follow records, but I think is you can't just say, "Oh, we beat them 10-0 with that,"
yeah, New Year.
because it's a brand new year. Because you just seen the Alabama versus Texas game, and Texas. I'm a UT fan. I was
I was
excited.
about to ask if you were a UT guy or not. So many schools down there in Texas. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm a Texas. I'm a
Okay,
Longhorn fan. My uncle
nice.
played there
Oh, awesome.
back in the '70s, so kind of was a fan because of that. But yeah, it's just you can't just follow a record because the Giants are still a competitive opponent when it comes to in this, especially this season,
Mhm.
because of what like you were saying, the additions y'all added to this team and adding those new wrinkles. You don't know what you're gonna expect, so you got to be prepared. And records from the past are in the past. Is what's going on
Mhm.
in the future, and you got to you got to be smart and you got to play at the end of the day.
Right.
But hey, I appreciate you for being on the show, Omar. Before I let you go, I'm gonna give the floor to you where they could find you at and any things you got going on because you're a busy man. I know you got some more coming soon.
I always got something cooking there. I appreciate. Well, first, I appreciate you inviting me on. Love doing your show. It's just I always feel like I've been on a few podcasts before, and you always kind of bring the stats and kind of tie it into it, and it's a good conversation all the time. But on the screen you could see my X handle, I guess it's called now, not Twitter anymore, but my handle on Twitter/X is at OmarZHRN. Like Aaron mentioned, you can find all my articles on offtheballnetwork.com. You could also find those same articles on deepcoversports.com. That's my personal publication, where you could kind of get email notifications of those as well. I also have if you're into basketball, a Knicks podcast, a New York Knicks podcast called Worldwide Knicks that should be starting up pretty soon once the NBA season gets back into full swing. And you can always catch me on a few other off the ball stuff as well, a few of the other podcasts I've been a part of. So I'm all over the place, man. I'm always putting stuff out. So, but yeah, definitely appreciate the time as always, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been Tacos and Touchdown. I hope y'all enjoy the rest of y'all Sunday. I know there's still football going on before the primetime game tonight, but y'all have a good one.